What's up, guys? This is Alex Christopher from the Duran, and I have with me Mark Sloboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst out of Moscow. And today we're going to be talking about the White Helmets evacuation. So, Mark, we're going to be talking about the White Helmets evacuation. It was an announcement that Israeli PM Netanyahu made. Before we get into the White Helmets, I want to ask your opinion. Why do you think the Israeli Prime Minister would make such an announcement on social media and on TV? Is this such a significant move to evacuate the White Helmets from Syria that it needs Netanyahu to make such a public statement?
Well, the fact that this had to be an evacuation through Israeli territory is significant, primarily because since Russia entered the conflict in 2015, the conflict in the south has been fairly much on hold. Jordan backed out of support of the rebels back when Russia entered the conflict. And Israel quietly picked up support for the rebels in the south. Quietly at first, although later they have since openly admitted it. There have been plenty of newspaper reports in the Israeli press about ISIS and Al Qaeda fighters being treated in Israeli hospitals. They're not hiding this. And then last year, they obviously wanted a story published about how they increased arms supplies to the rebels. And they've been very upset initially about the Syrian military's advance to the south to liberate this area up along theirs and the Jordan border. But there really hasn't been anything they could do to stop it at this point. And to get these white helmets out, it had to be through Israeli territory. And the only thing I can think of is that Netanyahu saw a little bit of propaganda, a little bit of PR and propaganda for himself, trying to paint himself as some kind of humanitarian for Arab peoples, which is patently ludicrous. But that's why he at least has chosen to make this public.
Okay, touching on the propaganda side of things, everyone is aware that's watching this video. They're aware that there's two narratives of the White Helmets, pretty much. There's, I would say, the Western pro-White Helmets narrative, and there's the other narrative that paints them as Al Qaeda, ISIS jihadists. Explain to our viewers who are watching this video both of those narratives and which one you believe most accurately describes who the White Helmets really are.
Sure. Let's start with the Western narrative that this is a group of spontaneous Syrian civilian volunteers that are performing vital rescue areas, vital rescue, search and rescue mission in areas that are being attacked, where the Syrian government is attacking its own people. That is, what their narrative is. They're basically heroes, and we've even seen TV, Netflix movies made about them and awards given to them, right. And that's all they really try to say about it. The other narrative, of course, is that this is a gongo, a government organized non-governmental organization. And the oxymoron is fully intended there. You don't have a non-governmental organization that is funded and directed by foreign governments, right? It is not just a soft power tool in this case. It is a sharp power tool because these are being used directly. It's funded directly, primarily by the British Foreign Office, but also by the American State Department, Germany, the Netherlands, a whole host of other Western governments, whom just coincidentally are all and have long, for the last 7 years, been involved in a quite, not secret, a quite open proxy war to overthrow the Syrian government. And we're supposed to believe that this gongo that they are funding is, impartial. And that's exactly what even the blatantly propagandistic Wikipedia article claims they are, impartial. Yet they only operate in areas, of the rebels. They don't operate in government-controlled areas. They are literally embedded with Al Qaeda. Now, no one has yet been able to answer me what a UK and US government-funded gongo is doing embedded with Al Qaeda, with groups that even the US government admits, they're on their third branding now, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Why is a US government-funded gongo embedded with Al Qaeda? And no one has yet been able to answer that. They always try to deflect the question. And never mind the host of videos that they put up online of themselves, with Al Qaeda, and a host of other jihadi organizations in Syria. They also, very interestingly, do not, and they are banned from working in areas controlled by the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, which is really just a branding of the Kurds, the YPG. Why is that? Why, if they're funded by the same government, they have the same patron. The U.S. is backing the Kurds. They're funding the white helmets, paying their salaries. They're not volunteers. Why is that? Because the Kurds have no love for the Islamists. They have been fighting a war in North Syria against them, be it Al Qaeda, be it ISIS, all of the groups for years. In fact, they were originally funded by the Pentagon, while the CIA was directly arming, funding, and salarying this Islamist and jihadi sectarian militants, literally allied and embedded with Al Qaeda. This was during the Obama administration, and it showcases the complete inanity and the lack of any greater U.S. strategy. You literally had the Pentagon and the CIA fighting a proxy war against each other through the Islamists and the Kurds. Well, the Kurds banned the white helmets from operating in their territory. They were kicked out of Afrin because the Kurds, the U.S.-backed Kurds, are well aware of who and what the white helmets are, what their loyalties are, what the political ideology that motivates them are, and how they are used as a sharp power tool to prep Western populations and to try to encourage direct involvement of the U.S. and the other Western powers in the war to overthrow the Syrian government, to transition from not so covert regime change ops via proxy war to direct bombing and warfare. And they've come very close to that several times. We haven't progressed any further than limited airstrikes. And of course, they furthered the narrative of chemical weapons attacks. Most recently in Duma and East Ghouta, we had the situation where they were the ones on the scene providing the videos out of Jaish al-Islam, the Army of Islam's controlled territory, and they were making the claims initially that a nerve gas, sarin or other nerve gas, was used. Well, the OPCW's, the Organization of Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, interim report at least is out, and they have found no traces of any sarin or chemical weapons. So that blows up one little lie of the white helmets right there. And it's not to say that the white helmets have not done any search and rescue. They have, right? Jihadis need medical auxiliaries too, right? And there are civilians. There are civilians in areas held by these groups, whether it's all across Idlib where Al Qaeda, HTS is dominant, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as their closest branding is, or whether we're talking Jaish al-Islam, the self-proclaimed Army of Islam, Ahrar al-Sham, another Saudi-backed jihadi group, or any of the other 31 flavors of jihad. This group is there, providing medical auxiliary and crucially PR and propaganda functions for them. They have a 150-person press office out of their supposed 300 volunteers that are paid by Western governments. 150-person press office is bigger than the press office of the entire United Kingdom's ambulance and medical service.
Jeez.
What, of course, do they need that for? Of course, to propagandize for direct Western involvement in the war and to try to shift the narrative to their function. So, they do some basic search and rescue, although some of their videos call into question exactly how proficient some of their members are, at least in this. And their chemical weapon response videos have just been hilarious mock-ups. They should really hire some actual crisis actors because they're not very good at it. It really is laughable. And seeing Western media, report these things as any type of evidence with a straight face is a terrible condemnation and an insult to all Western public's intelligence.
So going back to those numbers, the number was around 422 ISIS white helmet members members, along with their families, were evacuated, and they're going to be relocated supposedly to the United States, to Canada, and most likely Germany. You're an expert and the UK. Well, you're an expert in this field. What does it mean when they're relocating this, guys? Practically speaking, what does this really mean? They're going to be relocated. Explain to our viewers what that term signifies for relocating these guys who were in Syria during the entirety of this brutal war.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, this isn't all of the white helmets, to be sure. There's a lot of them left in Idlib. This is just in South Syria, because the forces there have folded up so quickly. Either militarily or due to cutting deals with Russia and the Syrian government to transport their members via the Magic Green buses up to Idlib, which will be liberated itself very shortly. Forces are already underway there. So this is the forces that were in southern Syria there along the Jordan and Israeli border. And it's very interesting that they felt the need to evacuate them. Previously, white helmets have just taken the Magic Green buses to Idlib, like the militants that they are embedded with, and likely some of them at least are themselves. So a big question is why they weren't, why they didn't take the Magic Green bus route this time. And there's some speculation that they may have been preparing a chemical weapon attack, or at least the pretense of one, as yet another provocation in South Syria. They at least had the preparation for this. It doesn't seem that they actually decided to go through with it. That would be one reason why they need to be evacuated. The official version is that the government would seek revenge on them. Well, that simply hasn't been true in any of the other areas that the government has liberated and, cut these deals with the militants and their families and the people there. So out of supposed what was originally 800, only 422. We don't know what happened to the others. They're not being clear about this at all. They say, maybe they didn't reach the evacuation zone, or maybe they decided not to go. Where these other 400 will end up. Out of them, supposedly, only 89 of them are actual white helmets, and the others are their family members. That's fair enough. Islamists and jihadi militants have family members too. But the numbers have got to leave people scratching their head. Where did some of these end up? And there's also discussion that some other militant leaders may have been, not the white helmets, but the actual, official militants themselves may have been evacuated with them. Now, the reason this was done with evidently the coordination of Jordan, where they're going to be held temporarily, Israel, the UN HRC, Human Rights Commission, got involved in this, the evacuation, and supposedly Netanyahu, and it was done, again, supposedly, at the request of Trump, Theresa May, and Trudeau. And the largest segment of them will be resettled in the United Kingdom and Canada. And you are welcome to them. I hope you enjoy these as Islamic militants, PR people, as new members of your societies. Good luck with that. you can thank your governments for that. Only 8 of them are supposed. Only 8 families are going to Germany. Merkel seems to have backed down on the immigration of Islamists in at least large numbers. But it's a very interesting question why they felt the need to evacuate them in such a quick and public way when that hasn't been the case. There hasn't been retribution sought on them before. Of course, the move against Idlib will be coming in the coming months, and that will be hopefully the last big military operation in Syria, God willing.
Okay, so that leads to my final question is the significance of this move. What does it signal? Does it mean that the war is coming to an end? Does this mean we won't be seeing any more chemical weapons, false flags? How do you see this playing out? What does this move in isolation, what does this mean for the bigger picture for Syria?
Yeah, this is the last of what the Western governments like to call the moderate rebels. They weren't. They were openly in cooperation and joint territory with what was openly Al Qaeda there, HTS. Even the U.S. government admits that. Which ISIS, which lived right along next to them, without any serious problems, and these other Islamist and militants groups. They've been cleared up from the south. The war in the south is all but over. It will be over in the next few days at the least. This will free up vital highways and will start to revitalize trade between Syria and Jordan. And it will also allow large numbers of troops to be moved from South Syria to North Syria to deal with Idlib, which has long been recognized basically as Idlibistan, right? A jihadi and Islamist-controlled area. Even the Western press has admitted for years that Idlib is, for all intents and purposes, controlled by Al Qaeda. Now, there's some other groups there. Al Qaeda is dominant. They've been busy killing each other and assassinating each other and fighting for resources and rents and over little petty political. Who is the top jihadist there? But they are still receiving daily convoys, support, supply, fuels from Turkey, and the Turkish-controlled territory around Jarablus, the so-called Euphrates Shield Zone, directly abuts Idlib. And Turkey had hoped to annex this region too in their neo-Ottoman land grab, and is not very happy about what is already Syrian military preparations to move on Idlib. So what Turkey will do now that they're pressed and their proxies abutting their territory will come directly under attack isn't quite clear. Hopefully they will back down, recognize that discretion is the better part of valor, tuck their tails back into their own controlled territory, and eventually pull out of Syria altogether. That's what's they hope for. But there is a lot of jihadis in Idlib that will fight to the death. They've really got nowhere else to go now. Turkey is limiting the amount of them and their families that it will allow into its own borders now. And it has to be said that while even in the south there, while Israel was rescuing and Jordan were taking the white helmets, evacuating them out, they weren't taking any of these supposed large numbers of civilian refugees that were down there. Very interesting that. We don't take civilian refugees, but we do evacuate the white helmets. And I'll leave you with that question to ponder for yourselves.
Great stuff. Mark Sloboda, thank you very much for a great analysis on the evacuation of the white helmets. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and also click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help support the Duran. Mark Sloboda from Moscow, thank you very much for a great analysis on the white helmets. Until next time, guys, take care.
Thanks for having me.